This is a tutorial in which we're going to be learning about Illustrator to do some fruit drawings. Setup in Adobe Illustrator involves creating a new file. Illustrator projects can be for print, for web, for various things. We're going to be printing ours, and so there's a few options along the way. I'll highlight a few things to note, such as artboards. We're going to have two pieces of paper side by side. Now typically if we're printing, we have a CYMK format. We're set up now and we've got various options for our workspace. We're going to start with Essentials in order to get a bit of a sense of the basics. The toolbar has a number of different options. We're going to be using the pen tool, the add anchor tool. We're going to be using the text tool, the shape tool, eventually the paintbrush tool, and the pencil tool, and the shaper tool, as well as the Illustrator towards the very end. So there's a number of tools. You should explore those. We're going to now learn a little bit as we draw some fruit. So one way to draw is to start with just the shape tool. This is a basic rectangle we're going to turn into a banana. So we're going to start with a rectangle. We can change both the fill, that is the inside, and the stroke, that's the outline. We're going to add a couple of anchor points in order to turn this rectangle into a banana. And then we use the direct select tool to convert a couple of them at the moment into curves rather than corners. I might change a few more into curves to get that more banana shape. And then it's a case with under the direct select tool to just move points around to make it a bit more convincing. So those points there are anchor points, and these are control handles that we help to adjust the type of curve. They take a bit of practice to get the hang of, but they are fundamental to using Illustrator. So that'll do for our banana for the moment. We might make instead a triangle this time. I'm guessing at the size, it doesn't much matter which size. I'm going to turn this into a pear. We need to think of a better colour for a pear, so we're going to change the fill colour to a green pear sort of shape. Now under the direct selection, we can actually put radiuses on the corners. I've made a bit of a mistake there. I could actually select both of the bottom ones and do them symmetrically, and then choose the top one separately to make a pear sort of shape. But there's various ways to adjust and modify to make it look a little bit more convincing, but that will do us for the moment. And we might also make an apple. Again, the direct select tool allows us to turn, say, the top and the bottom into corners instead of parts of curves, and that can be just one way to build up the shape of an apple. We'll get a nice colour so that we have a sense of producing an apple as we do this. And I'm going to do something like the red delicious shape of apple with a bit of a heart sort of shape to it. Again, it's a case of moving anchor points and moving control handles to get the shape. That's a basic idea. Now another way to do exactly the same thing is with the shape builder tool. The shape builder tool is pretty amazing because it allows you to go freehand, and it'll interpret things as either a rectangle, a triangle, or a circle, and it's a good way to get basic ideas down very quickly. So you'll see it's understood that as a triangle and a circle. Now to get our colours the same as the ones above, I'm going to choose the picker tool, and so I have to select the shape that I want to change. I select the picker tool and then click into the area that I want to adjust. Note that you can actually move things a corner at a time or one point at a time when you're in direct select mode. We're going to do some of the basic things again. This time I'll try to make the apple fairly similar. there's various ways. I'm going to add a couple of anchor points this time, just to show you how you can add or subtract anchor points as you need to. This should come up with a reasonable apple shape. That's not too bad. And the pencil tool is the other way that I'd go about doing a thing. Oh, actually, I'll finish this banana first. So that doesn't look remotely like a banana. We need to add some points there, obviously. The direct select, we'll change those into curves so that we can bend them down one at a time. Not a very nice looking banana. I need to change a few more things into curves to start to make it look a bit more convincing. This could possibly be the worst banana ever drawn. Making plenty of mistakes in my hurry there, but never mind, because you can always just continue to adjust. Usually you would spend a fair bit of time getting your shapes just right. I want a sharp point up that end as well. Not a very happy banana, this one, but it's good to see the struggles that you have. In fact, this has almost got too many points on it, so we can subtract some anchor points, and that's going to hopefully eventually make it a little bit easier. I'm going to subtract a couple more just to make it a simpler banana shape. Do this sort of thing when you're doing lots of graphic design projects, coming up with vector shapes that are going to be useful for all sorts of projects. The pencil tool allows you to go fairly freehand to start with. I'd feel more comfortable with this one, and then you can adjust it in exactly the same way as we have previously, through the use of anchor points and control handles. So here, my freehand pair, I remember the colours that I chose, but I could equally use the picker, and my apple. Not the most wonderful apple as you can imagine. This time I will use the picker. Now, so we start to use shapes and build them and make groups and things like that. So this time I've got my apple shape, and want to take a bite out of it. We want to combine those two things. So supposing I want to do that, the very important tool that we need to know about is the Pathfinder tool that we find up in the File menu, and this will need to be studied fairly carefully to see how this is done. Just take your time. This is a very important thing. We've got the little Pathfinder menu available to us here in order to build complex shapes using a combination of different shapes. Now, I could unite them. I could minus the front, and so on. This time I want to minus the front from the other shape in order to take the bite out of the apple. Now I'm just drawing just a few additional things to make a more complex and complete apple shape. And bit by bit, there is actually three existing shapes there. We now might want to combine those. We go to the object and group those, allowing us to work with it all as a single apple shape, which is a good thing. Now I've copied that just so that you can basically see that there's a number of different styles that you might want to change. I quite like the freehand brush look. Text is another important part of Illustrator. We're going to do some very, very basic sorts of things using text, and it's good to change your workspace to the typography workspace. Some different options work down the right hand side. So I'm going to just type the word fruit, and there's many different fonts that you could use. They'll just appear as you scroll over them. I'm just going to choose one to start with, and one of the most basic things, again, just like any other thing in Illustrator, is to use the fill and stroke. Changing the size of the stroke can be a really good thing to do. Here's another thing that you can do within the text options. You can actually modify it by making a warp. and this puts a grid over your shape, and you can, using the direct select option, just modify various points within that to give it a fluid and loose look. You can have a bit of fun with that sort of thing. There's many other things you can do with text, much more than we've got time for here, but we'll just have a go at one or two other things. This time we're going to expand the word fruit so that it's no longer editable as text. It's considered just a bunch of shapes that we then can modify just like we did with the other shapes. I've put some little radiuses on them. If I select several points, I can move them all at once. If I select the whole, that's quite different. I can actually move individual letters just by selecting them one at a time. It takes a little bit of getting used to change these. Now, I'm not really making anything very impressive here, but you can see how we can actually modify and make our own fonts with some creative possibilities there. So you can even just change shape, various different things as options there. Try what happens with the difference between the select and the direct select tool. It takes a bit of getting the hang of the purpose of each of those. But I can now fill and put a stroke around those to make them look quite nice, and I can even use that fancy outline stroke that I used before, and letter by letter I can modify that. Just a couple of last things to finish the video off today then with text. One really important graphic design option is to put text on a path. The path can be a freehand one, or it can be a curve, it can be a part of a circle, it can be any number of different things. I've got a freehand line there and a circle, and if I type on a path, as soon as I click to identify that, it will write directly onto that path. And likewise, if I'm going to want to type onto a curve, I can do this either on the inside or the outside. I've got many different options here along the way. And lastly, we'll use the erase tool just to do some creative breaking up of our objects into different shapes. This works for text. As long as you have expanded your shape, it works for drawn shapes and is a good way to get some nice graphic effects, I think, particularly with text, but also with drawn objects.